For Homer, the best word to describe Odysseus was never hero. Warrior didn't fit either, and neither did king. Something stranger took that spot, a word almost nobody who knows this story could actually name. It's the very first word he chose for him in the very first line of the epic. The word is polytropos. It means the man of many turns, many ways, many roads. Not brave, not strong, not even clever, really. Just someone who's been rerouted so many times he's made of the detours. It's the single word Homer chose to sum up an entire 20-year story before it even begins. Here's what this video covers. Why Odysseus never wanted this war in the first place. What the sirens actually offered him, and why he chose to hear it. The scar that almost gave him away, and the bow that only he could string, and what all of it means for anyone still finding their way home. Legend says Odysseus faked madness to avoid the draft for Troy, plowing his fields with salt instead of seed. A visiting Greek dropped his infant son in the plow's path to test him. Odysseus swerved the plow. The madness was fake, and everyone in the field knew it. He went to war anyway. The war itself took 10 years. Getting back took 10 more. Homer barely touches the fighting. That's the Iliad's story, already told. The Odyssey opens on something stranger. What happens to a man once the thing he was famous for is finished, and he still has to find his way back to an actual life? Everyone remembers the sirens as temptation, something soft and dangerous. Read the actual lines, and the offer is stranger than that. They don't promise pleasure. They promise that anyone who stops to listen will leave knowing more than anyone alive, knowing exactly what happened at Troy, better than he remembers it himself. Odysseus could have sailed past with wax in his own ears, same as his crew. Instead, he asked to be bound to the mast, so he alone could hear the song and survive it. Wanting to know what the sirens knew, and trusting himself not to jump overboard once he heard it turned out to be two very different things. Odysseus tells the story of his own travels twice, at length, to two separate royal courts. He describes Cyclopes, witches, the dead rising up to speak with him. He never once describes what actually happened inside Troy during the 10 years he fought there. That part of him doesn't seem to be the one narrating. What he does describe is almost worse. A cave where his men are eaten one at a time while he watches, unable to stop it. A trip to the land of the dead, where old comrades from Troy appear as shades who can't even speak until they drink blood from a trench he dug himself. He fills the silence around Troy with horrors that are somehow easier to say out loud. There's a scar above Odysseus's knee, left by a boar's tusk on a hunting trip with his grandfather, years before Troy was ever a name he knew. It has nothing to do with the war he fought or the sea he crossed. And it's this scar, not his face, his voice, or his name, that finally gives him away. At the gates of his own palace, disguised and unrecognized by every human who passes, Odysseus sees an old dog lying on a pile of dung, flea-bitten and dying, ignored by everyone who once knew him. It's Argos, his hunting dog from 20 years before. The dog lifts his head, wags his tail and drops his ears, recognizing his master instantly before a single person does. Then he dies. Euryclea, his old nurse, is washing a stranger's feet in the hall when her hand finds it. She drops the basin. Water spills across the floor. He grabs her by the throat before she can shout his name to the room. 20 years of careful planning, 1 second from unraveling over a mark he got as a boy. Back in his own hall, still disguised as a beggar, Odysseus watches grown men, warriors, fail one after another to string his own bow. Not one of them can even bend it far enough to loop the string. His son Telemachus comes close, then stops himself, at a signal only father and son understand. The bow demands a grip built over years of using this one weapon and no other. It isn't a test of raw strength. It's a test of whether the man standing there has actually lived the specific life that once made this exact bow bend for him. The beggar asks for a turn. The suitors object, humiliated at the thought of losing to a stranger in rags. Then the bow is strung in seconds, the way a musician tunes an instrument they built with their own hands, and an arrow goes clean through 12 axe heads in a row. Every suitor in that hall had some claim on the house. Wealth, allies back home. One was even a decent singer the servants liked. None of it moved the bow an inch. The story doesn't explain why. It just keeps failing them, one at a time, until the only man left to try is the one it already belonged to. Blinding the Cyclops Polyphemus, Odysseus escapes by calling himself Nobody, a trick clever enough that Polyphemus screams for help and gets none, since nobody is hurting him. Sailing to safety, Odysseus could have stayed nameless forever. Instead, pride gets the better of him. He shouts his real name across the water, and that single word is enough for Polyphemus to curse him by name to his father, the god of the sea. Homer opens by asking a goddess to sing the story, not tell it. In the ancient world, a life only fully existed once a bard turned it into verse worth repeating around a fire. Achilles chose a short life people would still be singing about over a long one nobody would ever mention again. For a Greek hero, that wasn't even a hard call. Achilles got exactly what he chose, a short life, an enormous song. Odysseus is the other option Homer puts right next to him. Not glory bought with an early death, but 20 extra years of wandering, failing, grieving, just to get back to people who'd still know him by name. The Odyssey is the answer to a question the Iliad never has to ask. What's left for a hero who doesn't want to die famous? The part of the myth that gets skipped, the bow only mattered inside Odysseus's own house, in front of people who'd known him his whole life. Nobody at Troy ever watched him string it. It wasn't performed for an audience. It was proof, aimed at exactly the people entitled to demand it. The 10 extra years of wandering read like punishment, the gods delaying a reunion Odysseus had already earned. Homer doesn't write it that way. The bow only answers to him because of exactly those 10 years. The monsters, the losses, the choices made half drowned and out of options. Skip the detour, and there's no hand left that fits the weapon. Calypso offers Odysseus immortality if he stays with her forever. He says no. Homer doesn't make this an easy choice. 7 years of Odysseus, sitting on the beach every day, staring at the water, grieving a home he isn't even sure will still recognize him. Wanting to go back and being ready to go back turned out to be 2 different problems. Nobody in this story gets to skip the return. Not the man who fought the war, not the wife who waited, not the son who grew up in the meantime. The only question the myth ever actually asks is what shape you're in once you get there, and whether the people waiting will still know you. Penelope tells her suitors she'll choose one of them the moment she finishes weaving a burial shroud for her father-in-law. She works on it in daylight, where they can all see her making progress. Every night, alone, she pulls the threads back out. It takes 3 years before a servant finally gives up the secret. The phrase Penelope's web survives today for any task deliberately never finished, usually said with a little contempt, as if delay were the same thing as doing nothing. It wasn't. Every night she undid a full day's labor with her own hands, on purpose, fully aware of the cost, just to buy herself one more day of not having to choose. When Odysseus finally reveals who he is, Penelope doesn't fall into his arms. She tells a servant to move their marriage bed out of the bedroom. Odysseus explodes. Moving that bed is impossible, since he carved it himself around a living olive tree, rooted straight into the floor. Only the real Odysseus would know that, and Penelope knew it too. The bed only he could have built, the bow only he could string, the scar only his old nurse would remember. Every reunion in this story runs through some detail that can't be faked or performed for an audience. Getting home was never really about the ship reaching land. It was about still being provably, specifically himself once it did. None of that recognition ever comes with an apology either. Nobody ever apologizes to Odysseus. Poseidon doesn't relent because he's sorry. Zeus doesn't step in out of fairness. The curse just eventually runs its course, and the raft still has to be built by his own hands. The 10 years still have to be lived through one at a time. Somewhere past a certain age, most people find themselves in the same position, carrying something that was never fair, waiting on an apology that was never coming, and finding out that the waiting was never actually the thing standing between them and home. The suitors spend years occupying Odysseus's house, eating his food, courting his wife, without ever earning any of it. They aren't villains exactly. They're just what happens to a life left unattended. People who move in because nobody who actually belonged there was around to say no. Getting home meant clearing them out first. The bow sat untouched for 20 years, waiting for the one hand that could still use it. Whatever version of that exists for you, a skill, a relationship, the version of yourself you left mid-sentence, isn't going to string itself while you're gone. It just sits there, unusable to anyone but you, exactly the way the suitors found it. So here's the actual question underneath all of it. What's the bow sitting in your storeroom that nobody else in the room can even bend, let alone fire? And if the people who know you best finally watched you pick it up again, would they recognize what they were looking at? Homer never says whether Ithaca felt the way Odysseus remembered it, only that he was finally standing in it, as himself, string in hand. That's the whole ending the story ever promises anyone.
Thank you for watching. If this video brought you any value, please consider subscribing and leaving a like. For more content like this, hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. See you next time.